to this platform of Nehru Science Center on this World Environment Day, which we are celebrating for last 2 days. And let me just say a few things about Nehru Science Center, because we have been in science popularization, making people aware about or creating scientific temperament. We are part of Ministry of Culture and a larger organization which is called National Council of Science Museums, having its network of 25 science centers spread all over India. And now we are not expanding much because we are making science centers and transferring to the concerned agencies who can run, means build and transfer. So, but there are almost now around 60 science centers which are functioning around in different part of the country, you can say. We are being visited by almost 7 lakh visitors. It is obviously the data is pre-COVID, but now after opening, I think we are getting good number of visitors. Today was Sunday, almost 4,000 because vacations are going on. We conduct lot many programs, panel discussions, lectures. We basically provide platform for people who want to communicate to the young audience, young budding scientists, you can say, and the message which is to be given to the young generation. So we provide that platform because most of our visitors, almost 50% of them, you can see in organized school groups and all. So today we are organizing this panel discussion on the World Environment Day. And, you know, it was in 1972. So it is very special day because we are celebrating 50 years also of that conference, where the first time the environment, human environment, that was the theme given in 1972. And that laid the foundation when first time 1973 this was celebrated. So perhaps now once again, in after 50 years, perhaps it is time now to see where we are when we started, what we have achieved, maybe what we need to do, and to decide or discuss a few things about all that. A lot of things have happened. So we'll see. It is maybe very difficult to cover in this maybe 40 minutes or 45 minutes, but we'll try to touch some of the points which we would like to communicate. We have with us for this panel discussion, distinguished panelists. I'll start with Ms. Sumaira Abdul Ali. She is environmentalist and associated with BNHS, Bombay Natural History Society, and she's also founder of Awaz Foundation. It's basically for noise pollution and all that. So we'll welcome ma'am to this program. We have also with us Dr. Rakesh Kumar, who is Director, National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, which is a lab of CSIR in Nagpur. And he's well associated with Nehru Science Center as well for many years. He was chairman of our local advisory committee in Nagpur Science Center, Raman Science Center, and presently he is posted with CSIR headquarters in Delhi. We are also fortunate to have Sri Manish Sharma ji, who is IPS and Additional Director General of Police in Government of Madhya Pradesh. So welcome, sir. And Dr. Sonali Khanna, who is Associate Professor. She is a climate change activist, and she is a science communicator as well, though basically she is a dental surgeon or dental dentist, I should say, with Nair Hospital in Mumbai. She is also a friend of Science Center and well connected with our programs. So this is the panelists. And today the topic is only one Earth. Just think. हिंदी में हमने इसको ऐसा दिया था कि एकमात्र पृथ्वी जरा सोचिए, because we have been trying to find out what is happening in last 50 years. From that, you can say we have tried to find some other planet where we can go. There are a lot of discussions going on. Still, people are hopeful. But in nutshell, if we say in last 50 years, even best of our experiments, but still we could not see any hope that we can go somewhere. But the problem is why we should go somewhere else when we have such a beautiful Earth. Why we cannot maintain. This is not the way that you destroy something and try to go somewhere else. That's not we should do. So all those things will be discussed, and we'll try to put some points over there with our distinguished panelists because they are from different fields. India has joined Agenda 2030. We have signed lot many agreements. Lot many things have happened across the world just to mitigate this effect so that we can have a habitable Earth for our future generation. So with this, I think I will request I will introduce myself as I'm Umesh Kumar, and I'm working with Nehru Science Center, basically coordinating educational programs for last almost 28 years in different centers, but quite a good amount of time in Nehru Science Center. So with this, I request, I think, Dr. Sonali Khanna to start this program. Yeah, over to you, Dr. Khanna.
Thank you so much, Umesh sir, for this very concise and relevant introduction to the program today. And I think, as we all know, the World Environment Day is celebrated on 5th June every year. And it's utilized as an opportunity to basically review our progress and to renew our commitment of, the community to preserve the planet. And in November 2021, the COP was held in Scotland. We all are aware, and the world leaders had got together to agree on specific goals. Now, they were meant to reduce the carbon emissions and to enhance the budgetary allocations and provisions for the development of alternative sources of energy. A lot of enthusiasm was generated worldwide, and even the NGOs took upon themselves the role of monitoring the progress towards the national goals, apart from continuing to generate public awareness. So they played a major role, and in, of course, partnership with the government, and particularly amongst children and women, this has been phenomenal. Unfortunately, since February 2022, this year, Europe is witnessing excessive pollution caused by the continuous use of explosives and huge migration of the population in and from Ukraine. The world leaders have been unable to stop the conflict despite best efforts. And the sudden rise of temperatures, even in India and elsewhere in May this year, led to the enhancement of the power demand, compelling the government of India to allow increased coal production just to sustain matching thermal power production. Now, in this background, we're having a panel discussion today, and it is very relevant to Ek Matra Prithvi Zara Sochiye. So we have having this brainstorming to basically reformulate the strategies and to redefine the role of various agencies and organizations to save the only planet available to human beings, as Director Sir reiterated. And I'm delighted to see this stellar panel of distinguished persons in their own fields who've done a splendid job. And I'd also want to compliment Nehru Science Center for the amazing job they're doing as science communicators, as basic science enhancers to create that awareness amongst children and the youth, which is absolutely unparalleled anywhere, especially Nehru Science Center, Mumbai. And we can see that with the enthusiastic response we've got to the competitions in the last 2 days, from posters to slogans to quiz to painting, and all of those for even children as young as 6, 7, and 10 years of age. And I think this is what's important, because they're at a vulnerable stage, they're at an impressionable stage, and we need to create this awareness. And today, all that we set aside here also is going to be streamed all over social media by them, and I'm sure it'll spark a light somewhere. And I'm very happy to see our distinguished panelists today. Welcome, Sir Dr. Rakesh Kumar, always an inspiration. Sumaira Abdul Ali, Madam, we are waiting to hear your enlightening talk. Srimani Shankar Sharma, a person who's really spearheaded a lot of work with the police forces doing in central India, and so we're all waiting to hear you. Thank you so much.
So, Dr. Khanna, you can.
I think, sir, I think Rakesh, sir, you may have to leave early, so I think we should start with you. If you can give us some update about climate change, the latest strategies, where we are heading, and how is it affecting our environment and our health today?
Nice, thank you. Thanks basically to Nehru Science Center always that they remember us before and even today. It's almost like 15-20 years of association that we have had with the Nehru Science Center. Not only in terms of what they do, but what we also do gets exemplified and seen by people in NSC. And thanks to Nali, and also I see two other people who are also very distinguished person in their field. So we will hear them more rather than me speaking. I'll just make 2-3 initial points relating to climate change, what has happened in recent negotiation which got held, and where I was in the delegation of India to negotiate when summary of policymakers were coming in. What comes out very clearly is that of all the CO2 which got emitted, for which the climate change phenomena is taking place, and we are all pledging to control it below 1.5 degrees centigrade, 4/5 of that carbon budget which got emitted has been already consumed. Now only 1/5 is to be consumed, which will actually lead to 1.5 degree. If we exceed that, then we are going to 2 degree and 2.8 degree and above. To us, locally, it seems 1 degree or 2 degrees is nothing, where we are dealing with 45 degrees and 50 degrees. But what happens with this global average temperature increase of 1.5 degree is that local temperature can see very large variation. So when I was just looking at some data of Mumbai and Mumbai metropolitan region, some people who can relate to this, Kurla, which used to show an average temperature about 29 to 31 degree, just about 2 decades back, now is averaging between 37 and 39, almost 40, right? So some of these numbers locally can be as high as 5 degree above normal, 7 degrees above normal, which is extremely dangerous from the point of view of not only surviving, but also in terms of the energy requirement for cooling, which we will all need. The second point which I wanted to highlight is, while we tell everyone across the world to address the climate change issues, India has to take leadership. It has taken to a greater extent some leadership, but probably we need to do much more, because people are looking at our agriculture emission, people are looking at our livestock emissions, people are also looking at our waste related greenhouse gases which are emitted, and all of these things together actually forms a substantial amount of GHG which goes out of India's region, or Indian region for that matter. So the leadership should not only be in terms of policy and the discussion and the global discussion and discourse that we have, but also in terms of technology. So each of our Indian industry will have to do much more to control their carbon emission in a way that is matching with the global benchmark. And similarly for wastewater, for air pollution and greenhouse gases, all of these things should happen. So when we do all of these things together, chances are that we'll be able to show our leadership in a better way. So I'll actually stop here, and we will look forward to more intense presentation, discussion and pointers coming from the other two major distinguished speakers here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And we'll have you back for the questions later on.
Okay, sure.
Yes, over to Sumaira Abdul Ali, madam. You've had this major foundation, and it's everything. The moment you hear, talk about noise, I think your name is synonymous with that. So we are waiting to hear you, madam.
Well, Dr. Rakesh Kumar has covered the overarching picture, but I think thank you very much for inviting me and for allowing me to speak about noise, because that's a contribution which doesn't get noticed very often in terms of climate change. So thank you for inviting me to the Nehru Science Center and all of you. And, noise pollution has been, the two subjects that I work on have been little understood in terms of climate change until quite recently. Noise pollution and illegal sand mining. And both of these issues, when I started working on them more than 20 years ago, people used to laugh at me and say that these are non-issues in a country like India. But actually, India has led the way in creating awareness about both these subjects, which have now become internationally understood and global. And just in March, the United Nations Environment Program Executive Director, Inger Anderson, wrote an op-ed saying that noise pollution is an ignored environmental subject which contributes to climate change because it leads to species loss. And I'll just explain how it does that. Because noise pollution, although we think it's just an irritation, just a nuisance, affects your body, and it affects human beings, and of course it affects animals as well. And it affects human beings to some extent. More than 20 years ago, we have understood that it creates health issues. It's actually a health hazard. Although we like to talk of it in terms of just a minor irritant. But because noise pollution gives rise to deafness, because it interferes with the kind of activities we can do by distracting us, it also affects animals. It is said that even a caterpillar is affected by noise, it changes its behavior. And there was a study recently called Biology Letters, which the UNEP executive director referred to in her op-ed. And that studied the effect of noise on 100 species in Devon, in England. And they found that all 100 species across all types of animal groups were affected, from amphibians to reptiles to mammals to everybody else. So when I say caterpillars, it's not just caterpillars, birds are affected. We had a chance during the lockdown to observe how bird studies changed. And there were findings all over the world that the kind of song, the rhythm and pattern of song changed during lockdown from what they were in other times. The UNEP's opinion op-ed has said that urban areas are very important to control climate change, because urban areas are areas where biodiversity loss is very important. Given that we are urbanizing at such a fast rate, it's not enough to concentrate only on our jungles and forests. We have to look at urban biodiversity. We have to look at deep sea biodiversity. Dolphins and whales, which have been named as non-human people, because philosophically they have found to have a very strong sense of self, of individuality, and of understanding of the world around them. Their intellectual capacity is high enough for them to be referred to as non-human people. And children, baby dolphins, whales can get separated from their parents. Their mating habits are affected. Their migration habits are affected. It has been found that the kind of call that humpback whales make in the Glacier Bay changed during lockdown from what they were earlier. And although we can't understand whale speech, you can tell that there is a difference in the frequency of their call. And since they communicate through the water, where sound is transmitted hundreds of times faster than through the air, it's a huge, huge difference whether or not we have ships going and mine blasts and sand mining in those regions. So sand mining is the other issue which is very neglected, not known when I started. Sand is used, if the building all of us are sitting in is made of sand, because it's made of cement concrete. Again, it is not understood very well how sand mining is related to climate change. But today on World Environment Day, I'd just like to say that it is crucially related. It is the second most extracted material in the world after water. It is used for our entire built civilization. You could say that our civilization rests on sand. And yet, India, where I was attacked twice by the sand mafia, and then it became known internationally and globally as something which is a huge issue, India has not yet come to the point where we have mapped our sand stocks and correlated them with the supplies we are going to need to continue our development programs. So in context of COP26, which Dr. Sonali referred to just now, context of that, I think it's not just cutting our energy, which is of course a huge separate discussion. We need to look at other sources and other ways that we are impacting our global environment, climate, species loss, biodiversity, and human beings. Of course, women are most impacted by sand mining, because it has also been acknowledged by the United Nations that a major burden of the household responsibilities for their children, for providing food with the lesser resources which they directly command, and they do not have equal access to policy making. So climate change, women's issues, sand mining, noise pollution, economics, development, the way we develop, the way we construct, the way we consume, every single thing is related. And since we are going to be leaving the world to our youth, to our young people, it's right and natural that they should be the most vocal, which they are. They were there outside COP26 talking about the impact on them, on what the kind of changes they wanted to see. And I'm really happy that they have come forward in such large numbers to speak up for what they want. They are our leaders of tomorrow. So I think we're going to have to look to them, provide them with whatever support we can. They're going to lead us in technology. Dr. Rakesh Kumar talked of the need for technology. Of course, he's a light in that field in India, but we are all going to collectively have to empower our youth to take the next step and take the leadership a few decades from now. So thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, madam. And this is really nice hearing, especially about, soil and water conservation campaigns and the role you played in terms of noise pollution and making everybody aware of women's issues and the impact on climate change and the vulnerable section. I'd request everybody else to be muted, please, so that we can just have some clarity in recording. Thank you. Yeah. So I think before we go on to some questions and some policy issues that we will come back to for the panelists, let's first hear Srimani Shankar Sharma. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sonali. And at the outset, let me say that it's a pleasure to be a part of a panel that has distinguished people from different fields, even though the broader environment field is there, but within that field, someone who specializes on climate change, someone who's done a lot of work as a voluntary agency or as a NGO in terms of noise and sand pollution, illegal sand minings, and of course the Nehru Science Center, which has been at the forefront of educating and creating awareness. So let me compliment the Nehru Science Center, because organizations like these, platforms like these are extremely necessary. We in the government sometimes feel that there is this huge disconnect between the way the government is working, whether in the center or the various states of India, and the aspirations of the society based on and reflected by the various NGOs, the various organizations creating awareness on several issues, including climate change and protecting the environment. Having said that, coming back to and thanking Dr. Khanna, there are some people in the world who it's extremely difficult to say no to. She's one of them, and I'm currently in Hyderabad on an assignment out of my headquarters, but the way she requests and the kind of platforms that she provides in terms of interactions, it's something that even and the enthusiasm and the dynamism that one sees, despite that not being her field, climate change, but the way she has been at it really motivates and encourages others also, including me. So here I am in between something else that I was and delighted to listen to the various views that have come forward. I would bring forth some basics that I have seen across the world, observed during my 30 years in the government. And why I say world is Dr. Sonali mentioned, of my work in Central India. Of course, Central India is my birthplace and also my cadre, Madhya Pradesh. But I have been fortunate to have worked across 5 continents, including with the UN peacekeeping forces, in the US, in Europe, in Middle East, Asia and Africa, as a trade diplomat, as a law enforcement officer, so all across. And today being World Environment Day also reminds me that a huge humbling honor. When I was in the US, I was 3 years there, and because of my contributions, the mayor of San Diego in California actually named a day after me, which was the first time that a day was named after an Indian citizen official in the US. So just to bring and highlight the fact that what I'm speaking about or going to speak about would be from my experiences across the world. This specific topic, environment, climate change, only one earth, and let's save it together. I think it's crucial, and it's not only crucial in terms of only climate change or the environment itself, but everything is related. It was mentioned earlier that various sectors are being affected by how the climate change or the temperatures are going up. I would like to give an example that I faced while in the US. There was a Bangladeshi delegation of officials there. And when we were having discussions, the fencing, border fencing was going on. And they were very insistent that, do you really think that you can stop us from coming into India if the water levels rise? And when the Indian officials, and we would say, yes, that's primarily, see, the fencing is there to stop smuggling and of course, to some extent, illegal migration. They would say it's not going to stop. There'll be millions of people if the sea levels rise as projected. There'll be millions of people coming in and you really can't do anything about it. So migration, of course, is one aspect of climate change that is extremely important. Geopolitics, economics, everything is related to that. I think what we need to do, there are several key issues, areas that we need to concentrate on. One of which, of course, is engaging the youth. Platforms like these, organizations like the Nehru Science Center, of course, are doing their part. We need to do more. We, as in also the government, in various departments, there are silos. These departments work like silos. And each of us are doing our part, but that integration is perhaps not there. We just noticed that Ministry of Culture is the Nehru Science Center is part of the Ministry of Culture. In fact, a couple of days ago, the World Bicycle Day was held. And I was invited as a chief guest to inaugurate a state level rally from Bhopal. And when I was doing that, it also struck me. Basically, the emphasis was on fitness and health, but it also struck me, and I made it a point to interact with the 200, 300 odd youngsters who were part of the rally and emphasize to them that in addition to the fitness and health aspect, you're also contributing towards protecting the environment by not only using the mode of transport that does not pollute, but also encouraging others to do so. So the point I'm trying to bring in is this education awareness in common citizens is one aspect, but we need to also relate it to how it benefits them, whether it is through exercise, and therefore the indirect benefit is also the protection of environment, whether it is some monetary benefit that is coming, but we need to emphasize the benefits that are coming to them. And I think one aspect that can be pointed out here, and I'm happy to know, is that the Ministry of Youth Affairs and the Ministry of Culture, actually, we can come up, Nehru Science Center can play a key role in this. If they can come up with bringing organizations like the Nehru Yuva Kendra and the NSS. These are, Nehru Yuva Kendra, of course, is the largest organization, volunteer organization in the world of youth. The NSS is there in every university, every state. Now, if these organizations could be brought in on this occasion for such a noble cause, I think it's going to make a difference in society. The MP police itself, the government in Madhya Pradesh is doing a lot of things. Just in a minute, I'd like to bring and highlight that also. In fact, there is this special climate change knowledge management center that is being set up in Madhya Pradesh. There's a climate change action plan that has come up. There is environment assessment and vulnerability reports that have been published. There are reports for large major cities like Bhopal and Indore, how the environment is affecting them. So there is this bit being done at the government level. But what happens is, the priorities of government largely on a day-to-day basis do not involve environment protection per se. Having said that, there is a lot of scope. Even the MP police, I would like to give you examples, is apart from the cycling aspect, there is this, every superintendent of police or chief of police in a district is also the chief sports officer. Now, if the NYKs or NSSs or the Nehru Science Centers or the regional science centers in the states, they can actually, come up with some kind of a introductory idea to involve the sports persons from all states on, in terms of, in addition to doing the sports activities, also in terms of protecting the environment. Talk about it, speak about it, and I'm happy to initiate all this, at least in Madhya Pradesh and in other states where I can link you up. So this is something that really can make a difference. One more point that I wanted to bring about was we also need to resolve paradoxes. Paradoxes, Davos. Now you have summits like Davos where you have celebrities, economic top leaders coming in by private planes and also discussing climate change. Now this has to change. The world has to understand that what we need to practice, what we preach, each one of us, because each one of us has to make a difference. And Davos is just one example. It could be G7, G20s, any kinds of conferences. Also related to this is the per capita carbon emissions. We spoke about other issues, and of course you have been discussing these issues on the governmental level. But the per capita emissions are also important. Everyone, including the Western world, needs to realize that we need to reduce consumption. I think the UN also speaks about managing and reducing consumption. It has to be there for everyone. It's just not for the global South, as generally the discourse sometimes tends to be. Collective environmental action. I think that is the key. We have been talking about it. How do we achieve collective environmental action is going to determine how successful these campaigns are. On a closing note, I'd like to point out some key issues that I've also seen. Enforcement is one. Yes, we are related to it. It's part of our job, but I think enforcement in terms of already existing laws is not what it should be as far as protection of environment is concerned. And of course, this is where one of the earlier speakers mentioned about illegal sand mining and how she was attacked, which is so deplorable. And this is a huge issue in several states across several rivers. And there are large mafias. Unfortunately, the enforcement that should be there is also not there. The other point that she had made, I'm also delighted that she mentioned noise pollution, because it's a huge issue and it is not on our radar. The bureaucracy, police, administration, noise pollution is generally not on the radar. I was one day speaking to the chiefs of police in districts. Most of the SPs were not aware, let alone having initiated action under the Noise Pollution Act or the DCPs. In Mumbai, you have DCPs, similar. So what I'm trying to say is there is this lacuna where we need to understand, we as in the government need to understand that there are issues like noise pollution that needs to be taken care of, enforced, in addition to our regular duties. Let me also say at this point that whatever I have said or I'm going to say in the next minute, these do not reflect the views of the government. They are my own personal views, of course, built over these 3 decades. Finally, one small example before I close, and that is that Bhopal, the city itself, it's a very green city, lots of lakes, greenery still is there. But if you had seen Bhopal 20 years ago, there's a lot of degradation in terms of cutting of forests, trees, clearance of lands for various projects. And only in today's newspaper I was seeing there's this study by an environmental agency that points out the number of trees cut for major projects only in Bhopal in the last 5 years. And it says, the BRTS corridor, 2,000 trees were cut for that. The Central Business District, 3,000 trees were cut for that. One major flyover in the city had 1,800 trees, destroyed. There's an MLA rest house that has recently come up, 1,149 trees. So what's happening is that development, growth, and perhaps greed to some extent are leading to issues that are degrading the nature, affecting climate change, and of course the green cover. So all these issues are crucial, but I think the theme that has been taken up today on this World Environment Day, that the collective environmental action will make a difference. I think that is the key. And this platforms like these, organizations like the Nehru Science Center, and people like you, the distinguished panelists from various fields, I think you are going to lead the way. Wherever the government can come in, wherever we can support, it's always there. And each one of us, each bureaucrat has to come up and say this. Perhaps we will make that difference. And, the decade, this is also being celebrated as the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, 2021 to 2030. That again, is related to what we are speaking about. So thank you very much for offering me this opportunity to interact with you, listen to you. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Dhanyavad. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir. And yes, and you've really, pinned it by saying the Sustainable Ecosystem Restoration Decade. And so, it started with a big bang, and then we had this enthusiasm, which was, kind of fading off. And so now we have to get into the gusto with, I think, this year and start off having, COVID and all these associated activities a little faded. I want you, sir, to, highlight some things regarding biodiversity and wildlife conservation, especially the role Madhya Pradesh has played and essentially our police force. So that's, I think, a good model for many of the states.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, because as most of us are aware, Madhya Pradesh has the largest forest cover area amongst all large states. And that has been a key to sustaining the environment the way it has been mostly in Madhya Pradesh. And of course, this large forest area over thousands of years has resulted in a huge biodiversity in the state. We, as an example, we have the largest number of project tigers in terms of wildlife protection. Also, some parts of the Ramsar project of the WWF, protection of crocodiles, other aspects, and also the forest department in the state has dedicated branches looking at protection of biodiversity specifically. And the forest department, the cadre of the Indian Forest Service in Madhya Pradesh, is probably again one of the largest in the country, simply because of the fact that there are so many forests. So in addition to territorial DFOs, there will be DFOs related to specific tasks in many districts. That is not the case in Madhya Pradesh. Of course, the police, though not directly related to protecting biodiversity, but just to give you an idea of how day-to-day coordinations work, there is a state-level coordination committee that has forest officials, police officials, and administration, which are tasked with protecting the larger biodiversity, the wildlife in the state, issues such as smuggling of articles and other activities that affect the wildlife and the biodiversity. And this meets on a regular basis and gives instructions to the district authorities. So there is a large amount of work being done. Of course, I'm not saying that this is the pinnacle and everything is hunky-dory, but certainly there is work being done. And again, I would like to emphasize that if we could have more, there are a lot of NGOs working in Bhopal on this with the forest department. But if we could have civil society and organizations like the Nehru Science Center come up directly with other departments also, not only forest, I think it's going to make a crucial and key difference.
Yes, thank you so much. I think, yes, the key to even the Prime Minister's message today is multi-dimensional efforts and interdisciplinary research. So I think it's high time we all need to think out of the box. And, it's not enough to just be in your own silos and doing great work and remarkable, success just in your spheres. You have to integrate those inputs, and so that the research is really applicable to the common man, and it's available to him at an affordable price. That's where I think the public health infrastructure is banking on that itself. And I'd also want to really also remind you that you raised a very good point about noise pollution not being really talked about in most of the states still. So I think Rakesh sir and Sumaira madam both can highlight that the High Court gave its mandate to NEERI, CSIR NEERI, to map 26 cities across India for noise pollution impacts in health. And that's going on at a very good speed, and they've made some headway. And according to that pattern, they're happening to, assess the health impacts of noise pollution. So that's traffic noise, domestic noise, and industrial noise, etc. So I think that's going to be something important. And I thank you for, reminding us about youth involvement, the role of NSS, NCC. And basically, that's the whole essence of the program today, because here we have Nehru Science Center, who are the best science communicators. And, the message of science is actually done by an institute and the National, Science Museums, Council of Science Museum, which is a part of Ministry of Culture. So basically, we have to understand that in India, our customs and traditions basically have a scientific basis, and that's why the youth and the society at large has to be involved in spearheading this movement. And I think that's our strong point as Indians. We must remember that and keep reinforcing that in us. That's important. So over to Rakesh Kumar sir. We'd want you to, sir, are you there?
I think Dr. Rakesh Kumar
is not there.
available
okay,
right now.
So till then, I think, Sumaira madam, if you can just give us some insight about what you said about urban areas and the biodiversity management there. So where are we lacking, and what are the acute, steps to be taken?
Well, Maharashtra and Mumbai was the first state to come up with the Mumbai Climate Action Plan, which has told us a great deal about what can be done and what should be done. The problem, unfortunately, of course, is implementation. And implementation of this plan often means making hard choices. So you have a need for certain infrastructure, but that infrastructure destroys trees, destroys the coast, in some cases destroys other things. Even during lockdown, when the whole world experienced quiet, even in the urban areas and most of Mumbai, there were some infrastructure projects which continued, and they made so much noise that, I have received at least one call a day for the last 20 years. That's the very minimum. At times, there are hundreds of calls over a few days, especially in the initial stages. So I know what are the forms of noise which are impacting people. And during lockdown, when all of us were so happy that we experienced bird song in our cities and other things like that, there were people who were really suffering because of noise pollution. So enforcement is a key, education is a key. The Nehru Science Center was so important to me. I have just come back a few hours ago, and I'm still very jet lagged. But because it was the Nehru Science Center, which is so attached, related to education and children, I couldn't say no to your invitation, and I'm so happy to be here. Because in today's day, I think it's young people who are teaching their parents how to care for the environment. Dr. Rakesh Kumar and I have worked together on developing the need to check firecrackers. The High Court order on which these mapping of cities is based was on my petition to the Bombay High Court. Dr. Rakesh Kumar and NEERI have given us the technological inputs which have told us how to control noise pollution. There are so many ways there can be reduced emission firecrackers, although I'm not satisfied. I think they should be further reduced. But still, it's made a huge difference, and people have known about it. There is distributed sound systems. There are TV and radio and mobile phone apps which can be used to substitute loudspeakers to give various types of messages, including religious messages, political messages. So there are many things which can be done, and biodiversity can be protected in urban areas. Very importantly, we all experienced it during lockdown, and we need to keep experiencing it while continuing our activities by finding better ways and different ways of continuing our activities.
Thank you so much. And a quick question, madam, a very senior scientist from our group wants to know what would be the positive effects of sound, including unwanted sound, traveling faster in warm water in the communication system of dolphins?
Well, dolphins communicate through sound. So sound is not noise necessarily, although noise is a form of sound. Because sound is a noise, is a type of sound which distracts or which in some way masks the positive effects. So underwater, where sound travels so much faster, it is their medium of communication. We are not sure they can see at all, because when you go to the deep sea, there is no light. And there is no way that many of these animals can see. And their communication is mainly through sound, as far as we know. So when we interfere with that, we are interfering with the whole ecosystem and a whole way of life, which we understand much less than we do on Earth. So that's what it is. It has been found. We have seen increased strandings of dolphins, porpoises, dugongs, whales all over the world. But even in India, in Maharashtra, in the last several years, we have seen more than 80 strandings, I think in a period of 4 years, of these mammals. So we don't know. There could be many reasons for it, but certainly noise could be one of them. And we need to take care, to look after ourselves, of course, but other species as well. And the deep sea is something we don't understand. We only talk about plastics in the ocean. We don't understand what else we are doing.
Yeah, Sumera ma'am, I have one question. Means it's related with policy. Means it is well established scientifically that beyond certain decibel level, it is definitely going to impact human beings as well. Though we consider that we are the intelligent species, after that, when it is scientifically established, why government cannot take cognizance of that beyond certain level? And it is not, I think, it doesn't need a rocket science to know in which area. They are already, I think, detecting also through putting sensors. So why the action, immediate action? Why we always need to go through court and long process? I don't know how this can be implemented as a part of policy, that police maybe they can have that power. Okay, this area is definitely giving more noise, so it should be immediately. I think Mr. Manish Sharma is also there. Both of you can address this, how it can be made part of a very easy implementation. I don't think it needs very hardcore policy decision from.
Yeah, again, excellent point made by Mr. Stagi. Like I said earlier, the police, it has the powers. There is this Noise Pollution Act. The police has the powers. The key issue of enforcement, why I bring it up again, is that, two parts of that. One, the police is hard pressed in every state. You ask the Commissioner of Police, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Bhopal, everywhere. The priorities are different. Law and order, crime, VIP security will always be a priority. So those being the priorities, enforcing the Noise Pollution Act and limiting the noise is not a priority for various reasons. So that's one part. The second part is the awareness. Like I told you, the chiefs of police, superintendents of police, DCPs, commissioners, most of them are not aware that there is this act. So you have that power there to enforce. The question of enforcement comes, one, when you have the time and priority, and two, when you are aware about it. I think if we can bridge this gap, and this is why I say, organizations like the Science Center, people like you, Dr. Rakesh Kumar, of course, Sumera ji, the civil society, if there is some kind of an integration between, I'm sure, Sumera ji may have approached perhaps the Commissioner of Police Mumbai, but if she does that at a DCP level, the districts where everything happens, that her organization, of course, the Nehru Science Center, if you approach at the DCP level saying this is the issue, it needs to be handled, it needs to be tackled. Let me also give you an example on this from about a couple of months ago, where the police commissioner Jaipur has started enforcing the law, the noise pollution law, in a very, very innovative manner from that perspective that it wasn't done earlier. It is not being done in many other cities and states. What he's doing is he has enforced that mobile DJs will not be allowed in the city. Imagine the impact. If mobile DJs are not being allowed for whatever cause, it could be X, Y, Z. If they are not being allowed, the amount of noise pollution that is reduced is phenomenal. If one city, can do it, it can be done. It can be done. There are Supreme Court guidelines, orders on loudspeakers. Most of cities in India, those are not being enforced. So I think the key is enforcement, and that enforcement will come through a more collective action from organizations like yours and individuals like.
I may just add to that.
Yeah,
All
yes,
of that is correct, and I really appreciate that you said it. Because of the one question was, why does everything have to go through the courts? So the thing with a court order, as I discovered a long time ago, was that it does two things. One is it makes the authorities aware, because they have to be aware, especially when we were very fortunate to have a petition which I filed in 2003, gave us the first silent zones in the country. And then that petition was heard periodically. And you mentioned the Supreme Court, in which we also had something to do. And then the matter came back to the High Court in 2016 and was heard. And as a direct result of that, because the court also took up for 2 years enforcement of its own order, practically on a weekly basis, sometimes more than that. So when you're monitoring enforcement twice weekly by the court, it makes a lot of change. And the changes that happened in Mumbai and Maharashtra were, firstly, as the Jaipur commissioner is now doing, in 2016, DJs were banned all across the state. The firecrackers were controlled. The traffic was controlled. The mechanisms to complain were laid down by the court and provided on affidavit by the police, which means to say that any citizen can complain. There's an anonymous method of complaint. And people have used that mechanism to such a large extent in Mumbai that when our police commissioner took charge 2 months ago, he invited complaints from people on any kind of policing issue. And noise pollution was identified by him as a top priority of the police. He took it up and he has, I suggested to him that awareness to people as to why they should stop honking should precede enforcement, because unless people know why they are being fined, it's no use. The Maharashtra state government increased its fines from 1,000 rupees to 2,000 rupees. Just this morning or yesterday, I heard that the taxi union is not very happy, but it's happening. And the auto rickshaw union partnered with us. In 2018, the state government of Maharashtra declared a no honking year. That was all during this High Court enforcement period. So enforcement is very important. And we are a very fortunate country that we have this method where we can engage with enforcement as just an ordinary citizen who may not know that much to start with, but who can invite complaints and who can coordinate this effort in such a way that it does lead to better enforcement from traffic. And the most important of all is that when you do something like this, you're educating people all along. So you're educating the schools. The government of Maharashtra educated children in every municipal school in Mumbai, in Maharashtra, about why they should not make noise. And that resulted in a marked decrease in firecracker use and children telling their parents they didn't want to use them. In the lockdown, when even the Supreme Court and National Green Tribunal gave orders that that public gatherings should be controlled because of COVID, it was only in Mumbai that there was a voluntary effort by everybody, because they had made this connection between health and ways of doing various activities. And I was so touched when the president of the Ganpati Mandal Association, who had been my kind of, on the other side of the fence for a long time, called me and said that we understand that you are right, and not only are we going to ensure it during our festival season, but we have formed a group of our own boys who will go around, and this time when you go and you check your noise readings with your decibel meter, you will not find violations. And in that year, I found only one violation. When I went to the site of where Ganpati immersions are most at the Girgaon Chowpatty site, the minute they saw my decibel meter, the police opened the doors and said, "Madam, this year you'll be very happy." When I have seen violations after that, I have noticed, I went to Sholapur and took some noise violations at the request of the Commissioner of Police, Sholapur, recently during one of the festival seasons. And I noticed that the minute that the revelers saw my decibel meter, they would turn it down to the extent where it was impossible to take readings. So they all recognize the decibel meter. They know what it is. The religious places have come forward and developed their own apps because they said they understand the law. They don't want to make noise. So this can be done. It takes time. It's a whole different way of looking at it. But of course, having said all this, enforcement is still important, because whether it's any other kind of crime, whether it's stealing or whatever it is, you can have one person stealing, which disrupts a very law and order abiding state. And for that, you need enforcement. So in awareness, enforcement, these go hand in hand. They go together. Awareness and enforcement. First, awareness of the enforcement authorities and the politicians. I have talked to the constables of the Mumbai police. I've spoken to a few hundred already. Before that, I spoke to the officers of the Mumbai police, educating them how to use the decibel meter, how to take noise readings. And I'm so happy that they're all doing it today.
Great, thank you so much. You've covered the enforcement so much, and I think today, apart from the Swachh Bharat campaign in India being reinforced by our Honorable Prime Minister, I think he's spoken a lot about violators of environmental laws, that they need to be punished severely. And I think, yes, that will, remind everybody. Another thing which is on a positive note today is that India has achieved a goal of almost 10% ethanol blending in petrol, 5 months ahead of the schedule. This was declared by the Petroleum Minister today. So we do have things coming up, even in, very positive and integrated change, where people are really, ministries, those who are not supposed to are really waking up to the call of the day. And these are burning questions being raised every day. So Rakesh Kumar sir is not there, otherwise I would have,
Dr. Sonali,
yeah.
Dr. Sonali.
Yeah.
I know we are exceeding time and we were willing that we should.
So he's not there. I think we should, yes.
1 hour. But before we conclude, I know it's already now 6:35. I would like to ask one question with both our panelists. Just to conclude it, I think we should conclude it. Saying means they have discussed about enforcement and there are some issues on that. Considering that whatever has happened in Stockholm and the points they have raised or the key message they have given, that needs, like one of them was in 1972 itself, they discussed right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment, which perhaps was one of the articulated as Article 1 of 1972 Stockholm Declaration. And after 50 years now, we can have that where we stand. In fact, Agenda 2030, India has signed. That also demands a lot of bold and deliberate action. So considering all those things and their experience, Sumaira ma'am and Manish sir, we can conclude by just having their opinion on this. Do you think we have a clear political will at this stage to have this accelerated action? Because I think it is a very, very ambitious project, I should say, because we have to reduce so many means renewable energy, carbon emissions, 70% by 2030 and 2040. So lot many things are there. I'm not going into those data. I just want to have their opinion on that. Whether they see that we have a clear-cut political will to have this accelerated action to achieve all that, at least going towards them in positive. Yes, sir.
So yes, that's a great question to ask, because you see, the key to enforcement, or the key to anything happening successfully in all democracies, is political will. Of course, the administrative will and the others follow, but the key to success is the political will. And to answer the question in a succinct way, yes, I feel that the political will to achieve the goals that have been set out is there. It is certainly there. What will matter going down is that political will be sustained across political parties. See, what happens is, I've seen in other democracies during my worldwide assignments, the US is a very good example, where both the Republicans and the Democrats are one on key issues. National security is an issue on which they are one. There are certain other issues on which they see eye to eye. So the sustainability of political will be crucial in terms of achieving the standards and goals that we have set for ourselves. I see it happening over the short and medium term. How it is sustained remains to be seen.
Yes, Srimani.
Well, I think that political will is very determined by what people want, because after all, that's what keeps a politician in his chair. And therefore, I believe that politicians and political parties have different ideologies, which sometimes, you talked of sustaining an ideology. I think the key to sustaining an ideology is to make sure that there is enough pressure on them at all times to ensure, from people, to ensure that they see looking after the environment as a key to their own political success. And I think the COVID-19 lockdowns demonstrated that to a very large extent, and I see that the young people have their voice more and more importantly on the stage to make sure that they are heard. Whether or not the statements that we are hearing from government, which are supportive of environment, are actually followed through in terms, again, we come back to enforcement, will tell you whether or not the political will is sufficient. Because the political will goes in many directions. Environment is one of them. It is more and more important because more and more people are talking about it. But there is also imperatives of development which have opposing things which need to be done, like cutting trees, like more coal, like all kinds of things. So that remains to be seen. I think we're on a tipping point of some kind, and it's up to us to ensure it happens.
Absolutely. And I think apart from the governance, the public participation is extremely important, especially like you cannot deny things like climate change, amelioration, public health, boosting of infrastructure, or even tackling climate sensitive diseases post-COVID now, with monsoons coming, the rise of dengue, all those things which are very common to our society, but we often ignore that. And I think even changing profiles of waterborne diseases, we're thinking so much in terms of immunity and COVID, we've forgotten like basics of waterborne and changing airborne diseases thanks to pollution. So I think getting all that on track, there has to be immense public pressure, participation, and of course the policy makers will stand up to address that. There's no doubt about that. Thank you.
Okay, I think now we are overshoot at 10 minutes. It's time. I know. In fact, I myself have so many questions on that, but I know perhaps that is an indication we are closing it on a positive note. As Sumira said, perhaps public participation, and if people will make them to compel, yes, then political will also be there. Sir is already positive on that. Yes, we can see. So perhaps we can public participation can force governments as well. That and one more important, as both of them have said, that the organization like us, and in fact we made an exhibition in 2012 about climate change and putting all this with Indian context as well. A positive means impacts, but it can be almost 10 years before. Now it is old one. We have donated it. Maybe we'll come back with some more ideas on that. So we'll come back on this panel discussion also. I think there are not many questions we could not touch, like the triple crisis, 100 billions every annual demand to meet these costs and all that. From there, where they will come. Perhaps we have to come back on this platform for our audience. And sustainability, trees, I think both of them are touched. Number of trees we required. We had a wonderful lecture by Professor B.N. Jagtap on our plate. It is available on YouTube. Children or residents who want to understand this sustainability, how much trees. In fact, even the best of that, perhaps you will not be able to achieve whatever you do. But what can be done by using the technology, sustainability, all those. So a lot of things are there in that particular lecture by Professor B.N. Jagtap. Try to watch and you will understand it much better of that. So thank you, Smira ma'am. Thank you, Manish sir.
Thank you
so Sonali ma'am for organizing this and arranging all our distinguished panelists. And Dr. Rakesh Kumar, I know as initially he told that he has some.
And I think seeing the questions streaming on the chat, I think we'll have to continue this at some stage.
And thank you all our distinguished audience also. As ma'am has told, there are many senior scientists as well. And they have asked questions as well, Dr. A.P. Sharma. Perhaps he will also be someday part of this panel discussion. We'll come back. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Really productive.